Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:06 on this Monday morning in your nation's capital, 7th day of July. Thanks for joining us on a very busy news cycle, but we're going to keep up for you. That's what you expect. In 30 minutes, we're going to check in with Ruby Chen. He is the father of an American hostage from the October 7th Nova Music Festival massacre. We'll speak with him about the latest here between Israel and Hamas and potentially a peace summit with Prime Minister Netanyahu here in Washington, D.C. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel. Good morning, Bethany.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here as always.
Thank you for being with us. It's a busy news day. We're going to get to all of the stories, but I think that the eyes of the world are turned to Washington, D.C. right now because of Prime Minister Netanyahu's arrival and what could be a pretty momentous week. So let's bring in a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. He focuses mostly on Iranian security and political issues. He's Benham Taleblu. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly.
Yes, you are, sir. Good morning. Greetings to you both.
Good morning. Thank you. First of all, Bethany and I both noted earlier that it was rather remarkable to see our ambassador, Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, accompanying Prime Minister Netanyahu back to Washington, D.C. to participate in these conversations. I don't recall that happening in the past unless I just didn't notice. What do you make of that?
No, I think you're quite right, and I think it also goes to prove yet again that there's a more personalist element to the Trump administration's foreign policy and even diplomacy in Term 2 compared to Term 1. The cards are being held close to the chest, but they're being held close to the chest by a host of trusted advisors and personalities that play a very key role on a key series of issues. So, during both Term 1 and, between Term 1 and Term 2 in the public, Ambassador Huckabee really did have the president's ear and trust. So I'm not shocked that he's doing this, but it is yet another sign of the more personalist element of the Trump administration's foreign policy and diplomacy.
One of the things that I found really remarkable recently was when Benjamin Netanyahu, for the first time, actually went to one of these border communities that was absolutely ravaged on October 7th at Nir Oz. He hugged one of the hostage families that has been most critical of him. Do you think that what do you think about these hostage negotiations? We still have 50 hostages there. 20 of them or so are still alive. Do you think that we're going to see, with hopefully a Gaza peace deal, and obviously, there's a lot to go before we get to that point. Do you think that we're going to see a full release of hostages, or is Hamas going to hold some back as future bargaining chips?
I mean, there is no real, deal without getting all the hostages out, particularly all in one go, both alive and deceased at this point in time, in my view at least. There's no utility in just, another 10 or another 5 and giving Hamas yet another lease on life, because that's precisely what they're looking to do. Yeah. Now, I think looking at it from the D.C. perspective, there's no doubt the Trump administration is going to try to turn a military win against the patron of Hamas, the Islamic Republic of Iran, into a political win and try to get some kind of pressure for a deal with respect to the Netanyahu government and Gaza for hostages. But here I think it behooves everyone to see this as Hamas bargaining for its life, just like the Islamic Republic bargaining for its life. And that's where both Israel and America cannot afford to fall short.
So I saw in a BBC report that even Hamas is admitting that they've lost 80% of their sort of manpower and that they've more or less lost control of Gaza. Do you think that that is factoring in, or are they, because the deals that I've seen mentioned and talked about, it's like 8 hostages on the first day, 10 body. Like, it's still this piecemeal thing that we've gotten used to over the course of the last year and a half. Is the deal that the Trump administration is pushing and the Netanyahu administration, is it going to be all at once, it's finished?
Well, I think there's a difference between phased that accomplishes everything and then a piecemeal approach. I think there's still a way to get a phased agreement to get everyone out in time, and also to provide the Israelis both time and political space to see what's next or what's most palatable when it comes to Gaza and reconstruction and governance. But when it comes to Hamas, I mean, they will use any opportunity possible, whether that's under the auspices of the peace deal, under negotiations, or even under continuing the war, to be able to create more chaos. Because let's forget, these are folks who exploit chaos and this is how they live to fight another day. So I think, again, this is something both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu need to keep in the back of their mind as they're trying to, end the military operations for the Israelis with respect to the Gaza Strip, and also at the same time finding a way to get the hostages back.
We're speaking with Benham Taleblu. He's with Foundation for Defense of Democracies. I mentioned in the introduction that you focus quite a bit on Iranian security issues, and I'd love for you to sort of pivot there because I think that the bombing strike against Iran is certainly seen right now as an incredible achievement of our military and the Trump administration strategy. And that was very much a partnership with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli military. How did that experience, do you think, and the partnership and the cooperation that those two countries had going after Iran, how might that sort of reinforce and stabilize the relationship as what appears to be a approach that the Trump administration has taken with Netanyahu to sort of move him faster toward ending the conflict with Gaza, or with Hamas, I should say, than maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu is comfortable with? You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's no doubt the president sees the multiple conflicts of the Middle East, be it with respect to the Houthis in Yemen, be it with respect to Hamas in Gaza, or even the patron of these two groups, the Islamic Republic of Iran back in Tehran. The president sees there as potential deals to be had, or at least political space for a deal. But also, as you've seen with respect to the Houthis and again with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran, he was willing to pull the trigger when others weren't. I mean, he was the first to be able to designate the Houthis as a terrorist organization late in Term 1 administration. And with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear program, how long have we heard? I think about 5 presidents now in the post-Cold War period, all of them saying some version of all options on the table, and all of them saying some version of, the regime in Tehran cannot get a nuclear weapon. Only one of them pulled the trigger. So I think he's cognizant of the military victories that the U.S. has achieved, some of which was, the way was paid for that military victory through previous Israeli rounds of fighting, such as going after the air defenses across Iranian territory or the long-range strike capabilities of the regime in Tehran. But there's no doubt I think he wants to pivot from a military win to a political win, and depending on exactly what Bethany said, which is a timetable or phased or piecemeal approach to what comes next in Gaza, that could come with some friction.
So I speaking of Houthis, I wanna go there next. So my Israeli friends were all woken up at 4:00 in the morning today from another missile. The Houthi patooties is what they call it. They, once we see a cessation, hopefully in Gaza, where is American involvement going to come in to put an end to the Houthi threat? Because that is a huge threat also to the American, ships and everything that are passing through. But it seems like the Americans made a deal to the side of the Israelis. Does that signal that there is some daylight between the two countries?
I wouldn't necessarily say daylight, but I do think the Trump administration much more narrowly scopes the threat from the Houthis to being a maritime one in the Red Sea than with respect to, firing ballistic missiles all over the place. But again, the Trump administration and multiple American administrations before them have been trying to build a more integrated air and missile defense architecture with the Israelis, with the Arabs, with other U.S. partners in the region. And that integrated air and missile defense infrastructure should be going after and preventing the Houthis from being able to launch and successfully land these projectiles. And while I do think that the administration did, you could say, turn the other cheek when it came to continued continued missile strikes by the Houthis post-Iran deal ceasefire against Israel, what I think they cannot afford to turn a blind eye to is the maritime attack that also occurred yesterday. The Houthis now didn't take credit for it, but there was a UK vessel, I believe, that actually had to abandon ship that was hit with explosives. And this, coupled with the successes the Trump administration has had in the post-October 7 Middle East and also post-June 12 conflict with Iran, could strengthen their hand to come back and hit the Houthis again for violating the ceasefire, just like the Israelis just 2 days ago have struck major Houthi targets across Yemen.
I try to keep reminding our listeners our Navy, the United States Navy, has been engaged in conflict, in hot-firing conflict with the Houthis for a year and a half now. Mm-hmm. We've gotten a bit of a respite here with this ceasefire, but you're right. This is very much a maritime situation and quite dangerous as well. I want to keep it just for one last question here, sir, if I could, since you're an Iranian expert. Everyone talks about the Arab Street for the last several decades. What's going on the Persian Street right now? I think a lot of people were hoping after the bombing raid and after the humiliation of the Iranian regime on the international stage, that maybe there could be some signs of an uprising there and the people of Iran could finally take their nation back?
Well, we've actually seen before the Arab Spring and before folks started to focus on the Arab street, a boom and bust cycle of protests across Iran that really moved from being pro-reform towards pro-revolution and seeking to topple the current political order in Tehran. I mean, you have an Islamist authoritarian government at the helm and a nationalist and secular government in terms of society. And these two things are like oil and water, and they don't mix. And we've seen, particularly since Trump term one, when there's been a lot of foreign pressure on the regime, increasing scale, scope, different demography and geography of anti-regime protesters. Now, in my view, I think it was premature and even borderline foolish to think that during a shooting war you could get a very moderate population to be able to go out onto the streets. But now that the shooting has stopped, and now that the Iranian population has seen how neutered the regime in Tehran has become, neutered, unfortunately, not against them, because they still have this major apparatus of repression that they're using to jail, arrest, torture, and kill dissidents and anyone that they're accusing of being a Mossad spy now. But that as Iranians go back to normal, they will realize that their normal really was not normal at all. And the same things that got them onto the street in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and most importantly with the Women's Life Freedom Movement in 2022, 2023, in my view, will bring them onto the street again.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, though. Really appreciate it. Very informative. Great way to start the day on what's going to be a very busy week here in international relations.
Benham.
Thank you.
It's 8:17.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
One of the great things about living in this area is, of course, we're right in the center of the political universe. It's the most powerful city on the planet. We also have great monuments, memorials, statues, and, of course, the Smithsonian's. Just a treasure trove of incredible, entertaining information and culture. And I read with great interest an article at foxnews.com, why are major museums pushing climate change instead of celebrating the spirit of America? A real problem here in D.C. at the Smithsonian's, and it was written by you, Bethany Mandel. That's a great op-ed. And you talk about, as a mom, you take your kids to these Smithsonian's, and you've noticed a trend over the years.
Yeah, it's always not been great. So in the piece, I referenced the Natural History Museum. Kids are super into dinosaurs. Speaking of conspiracy theories, I don't know, whatever. We'll get into that another time. But they're super into dinosaurs. They're super into at that museum. They have really beautiful dioramas. My kids are strangely really into dioramas. Yeah, they're cool. So, and we homeschool, and so we go to these museums all the time. And there was a massive section of that dinosaur part about climate change, and it's exhausting. I wanted to stop going to the zoo because when my kids started reading, they'd see a zebra, they'd see a lion, they'd see this, and then they'd go up to the placard and they read it, and they say, "Mommy, are all the zebras dying? Are all the lions dying? Is this dying? Is that
because
dying?"
we drive a Chevy Suburban?
Yes. And so it got to the point where I hated going to the zoo, and I would steer them away from all of the signage and all of the explanations because they were scaring my children. And this is a problem across the board at the Hirshhorn, which is just an art museum. It was actually funny because they had an exhibit on Chinese art, and there was a lot of stuff in there about communism. Weirdly, none of the signage talked about the badness of communism, but there was a lot of that displayed in the art, let me tell you. But we went into one of the kids' areas, and I picked up a book, and it was a book about gender fluidity. And
stop it.
Yes. In the Hirshhorn Kids section, there was a book about gender fluidity, and I have pictures in the column about that book, but it's just exhausting. And there was another museum in Jamestown that we went to, and this problem is well beyond the Smithsonian's. And so when we were in Jamestown, this is a federally funded museum, and they had a massive section at the Chrysler Museum of Art called Jamestown is Sinking. And I want to just read to you because it's like everybody take your bingo card out for all of the woke words because it was pretty much all of them. So at this museum, the exhibit description says, in this photographic series, Jamestown is Sinking, The artist explores the relationship between climate change and colonialism, compelling viewers to examine how colonialization, spurred on by capitalist interests, has dramatically altered the natural environment. It's the whole bingo board just filled at that one. And these places are getting federal funding. And my question for the Trump administration is why? Why?
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah, good question.
Rick
you know
Grinnell,
what it is? I blame Captain Planet. Back in the day, right? Oh,
yes.
Seriously, we would sit down after school. We would watch a nice cartoon. Ted Turner starts to tell us that our planet is destroyed. We of course, had good parents who sort of put it in perspective.
Yeah.
But some the kids who actually took Captain Planet seriously and thought it was a documentary, they're now running these museums.
Well, and they're also anxious wrecks, and I don't want my child to become an anxious wreck.
Yeah.
But I was telling my kids as we were leaving the Natural History Museum the other day, I remember being terrified that when it rained, that acid was in the rain and that I would melt like
That's right.
like the Wizard of Oz. I'm sorry. I'm not on board.
Yeah.
Rick Grinnell has done an incredible job at the Kennedy Center trying to root out this. It's not just a Smithsonian problem. This
Right.
area of intellectual and academic thought is permeated by wokeism.
I come from the performing arts, and you were 100%
And the
right.
museums are the same way, but I'm sorry, if you want federal dollars from the Trump administration, clean shop.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And by the way, part of the reason that this problem happened is during the Clinton era, they hijacked the NEA. Performing arts became politicized during that era, and they did the opposite. They would only grant grants and money and federal funding to arts organizations that made a difference, and delivered a message.
And it's
and
not just
embraced
not just the signage; it's the professionals. They need to clean shop. For example, at the American History Museum, I spoke to a historian who said, it's like a Marxist struggle session on the exhibits themselves. But he said the big problem there is actually the director. It's a staffing problem as well as a signage problem.
Well, listen, you point out the good news with Rick Grinnell and what he's doing at the Kennedy Center, and let's reiterate what we said earlier. In this area, Mount Vernon has pretty much stayed free of that stuff.
Pretty much.
A few years ago, they had a really great – they do have – and listen, you can't tell the story of Mount Vernon without talking about the enslaved Africans who were there. But they do it in a way that is historically accurate, respectful of the situation, and makes a hero out of George Washington, as he deserves to be.
And it's because it's privately funded. That's why.
That's exactly why. It's 8:25.
Making sense of your world.
Thanks for taking my call.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Greatly appreciated.
Making sense of the news. WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington. A Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:36 now on O'Connor and Company. It's Larry with Bethany Mandel, who's been with us all morning long. Good morning, Bethany. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a nice morning to spend with you, Larry.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. And as we just mentioned, all eyes are on Washington, D.C. this week as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has arrived and will be engaged in many conversations with the Trump administration over the situation in the Middle East and the lots of moving pieces, including the disposition of all of the hostages still being held by the Hamas terrorists after the October 7th, 2023 massacre. Joining us right now is Ruby Chen. He is watching with keen interest these discussions as he is the father of an American hostage, Itay Chen, who has been held since that day. Mr. Chen, thank you for joining us, sir.
No, thank you for having me, and kudos for doing the Chen thing.
I'm doing my best. Listen, have you had conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu or with the Trump administration about the disposition of your son and about all of the hostages? Frankly, it's still an absolute outrage that they're still being held here after all this time.
Yes, it is 640 days and counting. As a U.S. citizen, the State Department established a function that helps U.S. hostages wherever. It's called SPIHA, special president envoy for hostage affairs. And they, of course, have been in constant contact with us. And we also have those relationships with Mr. Steve Witkoff, as well as other from the administration, as well as from the Israeli side. So Itay is unique by being a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen. He was 19. He was doing a mandatory service in the IDF, and he was on the border protecting the so-called ceasefire at the time when Hamas decided to attack and ambush all of those people on the border. And that was 21 months ago.
Yeah. So we saw recently the release of Idan Alexander, and it looked like the Trump administration had a lot to do with that release, if not all to do with that release. We're looking forward to, we're all praying for a resolution to the conflict in Gaza. And with that, the release of the remaining hostages that are left. Have you had any communication with the Trump administration that Itay and Omer Nucher, who are both U.S. citizens who are still being held, is there any talk from the Trump administration that their releases will be prioritized?
So when Mr. Witkoff came to Tel Aviv to put the final touches of getting Idan out, we, of course, myself as a New Yorker and the Nutras who live in Long Island, we had hopes that Mr. Witkoff would also be able to get all of the U.S. citizens out, and he, took us aside and kind of explained to us why it just wasn't our time, and we should take hope in the fact that he was able to get Idan out, and we became very close to the Alexander family, and of course we are overjoyed to see them reunited with their son. And Steve said, I'm not going to disappoint you guys. And we have that faith that indeed he will bring this to the finish line.
Your son was serving with the IDF at the time of this attack. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. He is of a U.S. citizenship as well as a German citizenship. His mother provided him that. So just to say at the age of 18, he could have done anything, college in the States, whatever. But both of my family and my wife's family come from the Holocaust survivors. There was a time where there was no Jewish state. Yeah. And my son understood the privilege or the obligation of being in the IDF. And it is, highly unfortunate that, we needed 21 months to be at this stage. We do believe that the Middle East at large is at an inflection point. All those fabulous wins over Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and even Hamas. And now is the time to pause from a position of strength and cut a deal that will be able to take the military achievements and turn it into a sustainable agreement for the better of all the people in the region, as well as for the United States that has strategic interests in the Middle East and would like to gain, the prosperity and the benefits from all the good things that it has done for the people in the Middle East.
I know that there's a lot of conflicting feelings among different hostage families with regards to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you feel like he has your family's best interests at heart? Have you had meetings with him where you feel like he is, carrying Itay with him as he's, having these conversations?
I'm sure he feels for us. It was just this weekend. It was the anniversary of his brother, Yoni Netanyahu, that led
on
the
July 4th.
Yeah, that's July 4th. So I'm sure it resonates with him. But when his government went and defined what are the objectives of the war with Hamas, there were a number of them. One of them was the dismantling of Hamas. The second was making sure that October 7th does not happen again. And the third is the release of all the hostages. And I come from a business background, and I know that you can't have more than one mission statement. And when you have a couple, sometimes one supersedes the other. And it's unfortunate to say, but as a fact, we are still here for 21 months. And it just means that the hostages was not prioritized as it should. And we, the families, are not in a good place when we see a partial deal that does not provide the confidence that the last hostage will come out and win.
Yeah.
And I think after such a long time, it is reasonable to ask for the Prime Minister to do a deal that gets the last hostage out with a date associated to it. And I do hope that it is not because of political restrictions or obligations that he has that he's not able to get to that point. You know, if you look at the deal at the moment, it's pretty similar to what we had a year ago. And the question is, why is it so difficult to get to that finish line?
Yeah.
And I am happy that President Trump, took this as a main objective. He's not given enough credit since his inauguration. 47 U.S. citizens have been released from either being a hostage or unlawfully detained. I know he cares about this topic. He cares very much about this topic.
Yeah.
And we just need to hope that the president in this meeting this week, today, is able to put all the players at a place that they find a way to get this done.
Ruby Chen, we'll leave it there. We will keep you, your family, and of course Itay in our prayers all week long and every day until he is free. Thank you, sir.
God bless. God bless all of you. Thank you.
It is 8:44.
WMAL, making sense of the forecast. Because you never know what Mother Nature has in store. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.